I paid $5,200 for my promotion party, but Dad turned it into my sister's birthday party. Mom grabbed my wrist and said, "Stay quiet or lose everything." So I grabbed the mic and blew it all wide open. Hello. Thank you for your support. This means a lot to us. We're on a journey to our first 100 subscribers. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Esther Pearson from New York. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's dive into the details of today's story. I stood at the edge of the banquet hall, hands still trembling from writing the check that paid for it all. My name wasn't on the banner. It should have read "Congratulations, Lena," but instead it read "Happy 17th, Ariel," in glittering cursive, gold letters dancing over a lavender background. I blinked hard, once, twice, trying to convince myself I hadn't just walked into my own erasure. My father clinked his champagne glass at the microphone, clearing his throat like he was about to deliver a eulogy. Tonight, we celebrate not one, but two milestones. I felt my stomach split in half. My promotion to department head, the one I broke my back for, the one no one in our family had ever achieved, had been folded into a birthday party for my baby sister. They didn't just take my moment. They dressed it in another girl's skin. I didn't move from the corner. Just watched the room fill with applause that had nothing to do with me. My mom floated by in a dress she said we couldn't afford last month, her arm around Ariel, beaming. Ariel did a little spin when people clapped, like it was her night. She didn't even look surprised. That's when it hit me. This wasn't an accident. It was planned. I caught my mother's eye across the crowd and raised my hand, not to wave, but to point. To ask silently why. She moved fast, cutting through the crowd like a ghost in silk. She reached me in seconds, grabbed my wrist with nails still wet from a manicure. "Don't make a scene," she whispered. "Smile. For your sister." Her grip tightened. "Or you'll lose everything." I looked at her fingers curled around my skin like shackles and realized, in that moment, what everything meant. Not money, not love, but belonging. The lie that said, "We're family, we'd never hurt you on purpose." The lie I had been feeding myself for 28 years. I studied her face for any flicker of remorse. There was none. Just control. Just calculation. The way she looked at me when I was 6 and spilled juice on the couch. Like I had ruined her perfect picture again. My silence had always been their permission slip. Every year, every slight, every time they introduced Ariel as the bright one, and me as the serious one. I had nodded, smiled, paid the bills. Now they were cashing in every ounce of silence I'd ever given them. The crowd clapped again as the cake rolled out. 3 layers, fondant butterflies, lilac ribbons. I recognized it. It was from the bakery I had ordered from, paid in advance. I remember because they had spelled my name wrong in the email confirmation. Lana. I'd laughed it off. As long as they get the cake right, I'd said. But this was never my cake. It never had been. My father handed Ariel the knife and kissed her forehead. "To our pride and joy," he said into the mic, smiling like a man proud of the con he just pulled off. I wondered what I looked like to him. Just a wallet with legs, someone to exploit and discard the second I asked for something back. I turned toward the exit, phone in hand, fingers itching to cancel everything. The utilities, the rent autopay, the shared family Spotify account. It sounds petty when you say it out loud, but it's not about the account. It's about the silence. The silence they took from me and repackaged as loyalty. The cost of that silence was steep. Therapy I never went to. Friendships I let die. Birthdays I spent alone so Ariel could have hers with all the sparkle. They didn't forget this was my night. They just didn't care. That's what finally broke something inside me, not the neglect, but the clarity. I felt someone tap my shoulder. Ariel. Lip gloss shining, lashes curled, the charm turned on like always. "Hey, I know it's kind of both our things tonight," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "But can we not, make it weird?" She didn't say thank you. She didn't acknowledge what I paid, what I gave. Just don't make it weird. Like I was the problem. I studied her like a stranger, wondering when she learned this, how to weaponize grace, how to play dumb while stepping over someone's bones. She hugged me anyway. Her perfume was sickly sweet, like rotting fruit. "You're the best big sister," she whispered. And just like that, I felt myself start to drift. That's when I made the decision. It didn't come with a surge of anger or a dramatic soundtrack, just a cold, detached sense of finality. A door clicking shut in my mind. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to wait for the right moment. And when it came, I would take back everything they stole from me, every ounce of credit, care, and comfort they extracted like a tax. I would not be their silent sponsor anymore. They wanted me invisible? Fine. But they were about to learn what happens when a ghost stops paying the rent on the haunted house. And it all started with a mic. I didn't leave with a slam or a scream. Just slipped out the side door while the DJ played that god-awful remix of Happy Birthday, and the candles on Ariel's cake flickered under a dozen iPhone flashes. The door clicked behind me so softly it almost felt like a mercy. I walked to my car in silence, the heels I bought for my promotion party clicking against the pavement like a metronome. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at the steering wheel for a long time before I turned the key. If I left now, I told myself, I was leaving more than a party. I was leaving the role they cast me in, the quiet one, the reliable one, the one who took hits and turned them into jokes. I pulled out my phone. First stop, my banking app. Second, my landlord's number. It was unsettling how easy it was to unravel the whole web. Like tugging one thread on a sweater and watching it dissolve in my lap. I logged into the joint account. Yes, joint. Because when they needed help refinancing the house 5 years ago, I was the only one with decent credit. I canceled the auto debit for the mortgage. Scheduled a formal closure notice for the end of the month. Texted my landlord, pretending to be dad, and told him, we'll be making other arrangements. Thank you for everything. My fingers moved fast, steady. No rage. Just resolve. I locked my credit cards and rerouted my paycheck to a new solo account I'd opened 2 months ago when I never told anyone about, not even my ex. It had started as a backup plan, but now it felt like a lifeline. Maybe part of me always knew this night was coming. The drive to my apartment was quiet. No music. No thoughts loud enough to rise above the engine hum. I passed streetlights I'd driven under 1,000 times before, but they felt different now, less like guidance, more like surveillance. I kept expecting my phone to buzz. Maybe Ariel would text something flippant. Maybe Mom would try a guilt trip. But there was nothing. Silence. And it didn't feel peaceful, it felt loaded. Like they hadn't realized I was gone yet. Like I still had a few more minutes before the world tilted. That was the most unnerving part, how deeply they believed I'd just sit through it. That they trained me so well to swallow every slight, they hadn't even thought to worry. I parked outside my apartment complex and stared up at the third-floor window that was mine. A single lamp was still on inside, casting a warm glow onto the curtains I hadn't replaced in 3 years. I used to feel lonely here. Used to imagine my mother's voice saying, "Why don't you move back home and save money?" Used to miss the sound of the dishwasher running in the next room or Ariel's bad reality shows playing too loud. But tonight, that silence felt holy. I unlocked the door and walked in without turning on any more lights. I set my shoes by the wall, sat on the floor, and started deleting every contact I didn't trust. My father's number. My mother's. My uncle's. Every fake friend who only reached out when they wanted something. My contact list shrank, and with it, so did the weight on my chest. I didn't sleep that night. Just lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling fan turning overhead. I remembered things, quiet things. Like the time I made Dean's List in undergrad and they said, "Oh, Ariel just got cast in the school play, too." Or when I got my first apartment and Dad asked me if I was sure I could afford it, while holding a check I wrote to help him cover taxes. I remembered every birthday I got a card with "Maybe next year will be your year," written in my mother's handwriting. Every joke about how I was the serious one, the planner, the background support system. I didn't need attention. I didn't need praise. That's what they told me. But the truth is I did. I just gave up asking for it. I got up around 5 in the morning and opened my laptop. A blank spreadsheet stared back at me. I started mapping out everything I'd done for them in the past 2 years. Mortgage payments, grocery transfers, car insurance. The trip to Miami I funded as a surprise for Mom. I itemized it all, down to the penny. It wasn't just pettiness, it was proof. Not for them, but for me. I needed to see in black and white what my silence had cost me. I totaled the spreadsheet and stared at the number at the bottom, $43,780.16. That was the price of staying in their good graces, of being the loyal daughter, the emotional punching bag, the fallback plan. I printed the sheet and folded it into an envelope I labeled, in case I forget. When the sun rose, I felt calm, detached, even, like something in me had sealed over, scarred in a way that couldn't be reopened. I knew the calls would come. I knew they'd realize what had happened. But I also knew this. They didn't believe I had it in me to disappear. They thought they built me into someone dependent, predictable. But here I was, sitting in a rented apartment with a new bank account, a cleared contact list, and a quiet so full of purpose it felt like defiance. I wasn't angry. I wasn't emotional. I was building something, a life without them. And when they finally noticed, they'd learned the most important lesson of all. You don't get to ignore someone and expect them to save you. The first week passed in a kind of muted fog. I didn't blast music or dance around in liberation. I didn't cry, either. Mostly, I sat in the corner of my studio apartment, knees pulled to my chest, back against the cold wall, surrounded by unopened boxes I hadn't touched since the move. I didn't unpack pictures. There weren't many to begin with. Just a few dusty frames from college, a photo of me and Ariel when we still shared bunk beds and secrets. But I left those boxed. I didn't want their eyes on my new life, even in pixels. There was something sacred about bare walls. They made no promises. They didn't lie. I liked it better that way. In the evenings, I'd sit cross-legged on the hardwood floor and listen to the building's creaks and sighs, learning its rhythms like a new language. My solitude didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I started keeping voice memos, not for anyone else, just for myself. Little audio confessions when the weight got too heavy or too quiet. Tuesday, 3:12 a.m., I whispered into my phone. I don't think they ever loved me in the way I thought love was supposed to work. My voice didn't tremble. It was too tired for that. Some nights, I scrolled through old texts, not to torture myself, but to verify patterns. To make sure I hadn't imagined the emotional hierarchy I'd lived under. Can you spot Mom the electric bill this month? Hey, can you come early and help set up Ariel's thing? You know we're proud of you, right? That last one was the most manipulative. It always came too late, after a request, never unprompted. Pride shouldn't come with conditions. That realization landed hard. I stopped rereading after that. I didn't need more proof. My therapist, Janine, asked if I wanted to talk about it. I said no. She tilted her head and waited. I'm not ready to turn it into a narrative, I finally said. I'm still bleeding out in it. She nodded like she understood. But even if she didn't, I appreciated the silence that followed. Not the kind that demands performance, but the kind that offers space. I started noticing the little things in my apartment. How the sun hit the floorboards just right around 9:30 a.m. How the heater clicked like a ticking clock when it turned off. How my plants bent themselves toward the single east-facing window like they believed in something. I didn't believe in much at the moment, but I believed in this space. It was ugly and sparse, and it smelled faintly of cardboard and resolve. But it was mine. No one else paid for it. No one else could take it. I began walking every morning, just a mile or two through the neighborhood. No headphones, no distractions. It felt primal, almost, like movement could keep the grief from calcifying. I passed brownstones in garbage bins, saw couples arguing through windows, old men feeding birds in silence. No one knew me here. No one asked me what I did, or why I looked like I hadn't slept. That anonymity became a sort of armor. I started frequenting a cafe on the corner. No one there called me honey, or asked why I always sat alone. I liked that. I liked that no one expected me to smile. The barista wrote my name correctly without asking twice. That felt like a victory. I tipped her extra every time. Sometimes healing doesn't look like growth. Sometimes it looks like not having to explain yourself every 5 minutes. I stopped explaining. The first call came on day 9. Mom. I didn't answer. I watched it ring out, the screen glowing like a wound. She didn't leave a voicemail. Instead, she sent a single text. Call me. We need to talk. No, are you okay? No, we miss you. Just a demand, like always. I stared at it for 10 minutes before deleting the entire thread. Not archiving, deleting. There's a difference. One says maybe. The other says never again. I stood in the center of my apartment, the text already gone, and took a breath so deep it hurt. I felt it in my spine. Then I whispered, Not into a voice memo this time, just into the empty room. You don't own me anymore. I didn't mean it as a declaration. I meant it as a reminder. For myself. For the ghosts I used to live with. I started budgeting in a real way. Not just for survival, but for sovereignty. I calculated exactly how many months I could live off what I had if I cut out all luxury. No takeout. No gifts. No unexpected donations to anyone's emergency GoFundMe. It felt cold at first, but then it felt clean. A reset. I bought groceries with intention. Cooked for myself even when I wasn't hungry. Not because I wanted to eat, but because I deserved the care. I began treating myself like someone I might love someday. And that meant boundaries. That meant not returning to the house of fire just because someone left the door open. I had done enough burning for a lifetime. Let them feel cold for once. Every night before bed, I whispered the same phrase into the dark. You are not their keeper. You are not their proof. You are not their apology in flesh. And little by little, I started to believe it. I didn't frame a single photo. I didn't light a single scented candle. But I made my bed every morning. Not because someone might see it, but because I wanted to wake up to something orderly, something mine. That was enough. For now. The first voicemail was from the landlord. His voice was strained, overly polite. Hey Lena, just circling back. Haven't received the April payment yet, and your dad said there might have been a mix-up? I listened to it twice before deleting it. The word mix-up clung to me like smoke. There was no mix-up. I was the storm. I had pulled the pin quietly and walked away, counting the seconds until the fallout. 2 hours later came a group text. Mom, Dad, Ariel, all shoved into one digital thread. Lena, we need to talk. Why would you do this? The irony nearly made me laugh. Not please, not we're worried, not even are you okay. Just accusation disguised as concern. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about the rug being yanked out from under their lazy feet. By the next morning, the tone had shifted. Panic. The bank account's locked. What happened to the utilities? We've got late notices piling up. I didn't reply. I was sitting in a laundromat folding my jeans with surgical precision, wondering how many times in the last 5 years they assumed I'd pick up the pieces. They thought I was the net, the backup plan, the plan B, and the safety valve. They had trained me so well that I had started believing it, too, that my existence only mattered if it kept them afloat. That's the thing about being the responsible one. They never expect you to walk. They assume you'll wait outside the burning house, holding a fire extinguisher, even if they were the ones who lit the match. Ariel broke the silence first. A private text. I'm sorry if you feel like you weren't appreciated, but can you please fix this? We're all freaking out. That if was doing a lot of heavy lifting. I stared at her words like they were written in another language. I could see her tapping that message out with her fake nails, pouting at her front-facing camera while I sat here in clothes that still smelled like detergent in consequence. I didn't respond. I blocked her. I blocked all of them. It was easier than I thought it would be. No rage. Just a flat line of disinterest. Like switching off a light you hadn't realized was still draining power. I sat in the fluorescent hum of the laundromat and whispered, let them freak out. That night, I microwaved leftover soup and watched the ceiling leak above my bed, a slow drip from the unit upstairs. I didn't call maintenance. I just placed a bowl underneath it and let it be. There was something poetic about it. Something symmetrical. Things fall apart when they're neglected long enough. Ceilings, families, illusions. I thought about calling Janine, but I didn't want to witness. I wanted silence. So I wrote instead. I wrote a letter I would never send. Dear Mom and Dad, I began. Thank you for raising me into the kind of person who knows how to survive being discarded. I filled 3 pages without blinking. I folded it and set it on the windowsill like a dead thing I had finally laid to rest. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. A number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Dad this time. His voice cracked in the middle, like he was forcing sincerity into a throat that had never shaped it before. I don't know what's going on with you, he said. But you've made your point. Let's be adults and fix this. Let's be adults. As if he hadn't just disowned me in front of 50 people, handed my celebration to someone else like a party favor. I played the message twice. Not because I needed to hear it, but because I wanted to memorize the cadence of entitlement. He wasn't apologizing. He was repositioning. hoping I'd slip back into place without asking for reparation. I turned the ringer off and walked to the kitchen. I boiled water for tea and stared at the rising steam, letting it blur the edges of the room. There was something sacred about these small rebellions, blocking a call, not answering a text, leaving a voicemail unheard. Not out of cruelty, but clarity. I wasn't punishing them. I was preserving myself. The boundary wasn't a wall. It was a wound stitched closed. And every time they knocked, I remembered the party, the microphone, my mother's hand on my wrist, the command to stay quiet. And I reminded myself, silence is no longer my currency. They began to scramble. I got screenshots from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in months. Ariel posting vague quotes on Instagram about family betrayal and some people forgetting where they came from. Mom commenting beneath with praying hands emojis. I nearly choked on my tea. That's how they process the loss, not with introspection, but with performance. They turned it into a morality play where they were the victims and I was the ungrateful villain. They never imagined I'd be the one to walk. Because villains aren't supposed to be the ones who paid the rent. On Friday, I got an email from the bank. Dad tried to reset the password on the shared account. Denied. I added two-factor authentication just to watch them flail. There was no guilt. Not anymore. Only a deep, unfamiliar peace. I didn't need revenge. I just needed distance. And the knowledge that they finally felt something. Anything. Even if it was just the cold. It didn't start as a plan. Not really. It started as a slow burn in the chest, the kind that makes it hard to sit still. For 3 days after the party, I replayed it in fragments, the click of my heels across the tile, the taste of dry champagne I bought myself, the moment I saw the cake and knew I didn't exist to them in the way I'd begged to be seen. Every time I blinked, I saw my mother's hand on my wrist like a warning, stay quiet or lose everything. I heard the room applauding as Ariel twirled in a dress she didn't pay for. I had paid for that applause, and it had never been mine. The night haunted me not because of what they did, but because of what I didn't. And that silence had started to rot inside me. I couldn't carry it anymore. So I went back. Not to reconcile. Not to reclaim. But to end it. It was a Thursday, 5 days after the party. I knew my father would be at the house. He always worked from home on Thursdays, in a polo shirt tucked too tight, barking orders on Zoom to people who hated him quietly. I walked in without knocking. My key still worked. He was standing in the kitchen, pouring coffee into the mug I bought him last Christmas, the one that said #1 Dad like a punchline. He turned and looked at me like I was an interruption to his curated calm. Didn't expect to see you, he said. I nodded once. No smile. No small talk. I need 15 minutes, I said. Then I'll go. He raised an eyebrow, but stepped aside. I didn't wait for permission. I walked straight into the living room, pulled the microphone from the party speaker still sitting in the corner, and turned it on. The static snapped to life like an old ghost. Everyone in this house, please gather in the living room, I said into the mic. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Clear. Controlled. My father's eyes widened. My mother appeared in seconds, followed by Ariel in pajama shorts, still half asleep, mascara smudged from the night before. What is this? My mother asked. I didn't look at her. I stared straight ahead, past the bookshelf I'd assembled, past the curtains I bought, past the family portraits that never included me in the center. This is me, I said, taking the last word you never let me have. I took a breath. My hands didn't shake. 5 days ago, I paid $5,200 for a party that was supposed to celebrate my promotion. It was hijacked, reframed, and stolen. Not a single person in this room asked how that felt. My mother opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. No, you don't get to interrupt. You've had your turn. I turned slightly to face my sister. Ariel, I want you to know something. This isn't about jealousy. This is about erasure. It's about watching you get handed what I worked for, over and over again, and being told I should be grateful just to stand beside you. She looked stunned. Her lips parted, but she said nothing. I continued. It wasn't just a cake or decorations. It was a reminder that my success is disposable in this house, that my role is to serve, not to shine. I turned to my father. And you disowned me at that party. You said it loud enough for everyone to hear. His jaw tightened, arms crossed. I meant it, he said. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Good, I said. Because I'm about to make it official. I pulled a folded sheet of paper from my jacket, my signed declaration of financial separation. As of today, I've withdrawn all support. No more rent payments. No more bills in my name. No more fallback plans. My mother stepped forward. Lena, please, don't do this. You're overreacting. I turned the mic off and looked her dead in the eyes. I'm finally reacting, I said. And I'm doing it on record. I dropped the mic onto the coffee table with a final clatter. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. My father looked like he wanted to yell, but there were no words sharp enough to cut through what I had already burned. My mother's eyes were wet, not with grief, but with anger at losing control. Ariel looked like a child caught in a game she didn't know how to end. I stood there for a moment, letting them feel it. The absence, the void of me. Then I picked up my bag and walked toward the door. My father called after me. You're dead to me. I didn't flinch. I turned once, hand on the doorknob, and said, thank you for this amazing opportunity. Then I left. Outside, the air was sharper than I remembered. Clean. I walked to my car and sat in it for a moment before starting the engine. No tears. No second thoughts. Just that same cold clarity I'd been building like armor. That was the moment I became unrecognizable to them. Not because I'd changed, but because I'd finally refused to stay small. They had never imagined a version of me that said no. Now they had to live with her. It took less than 48 hours for the fallout to hit full speed. On Saturday morning, I woke to a dozen missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, 3 from the house landline I once helped install, the one I paid the monthly fee for until 3 weeks ago. Then came the emails. Not from my parents. Not even from Ariel. But from the periphery. The uncles who hadn't texted me in years, the cousins who only ever tagged me in group birthday messages. Hey, heard what happened. Can we talk? I think you're taking things too far, Lena. Family's complicated, but you shouldn't air it out like that. They didn't ask what had happened. They already had a version. A pre-spun, curated sob story about the ungrateful daughter who'd snapped without warning. They weren't reaching out to understand. They were sent to fix me back into place. I didn't respond. Not to any of them. I let the silence stretch into something oppressive. That's when the public unraveling began. Ariel posted a selfie, crying, mascara smudged in perfect symmetry, captioned with a Bible verse about betrayal and suffering. Below it, my mother commented 3 red heart emojis and some lessons are hard-earned. Sweetheart. Subtle as a slap in the face. Then came the Facebook updates. Vague but pointed. When the people you raise turn on you, all you can do is pray. I didn't have to scroll far to see the likes stack up. People who knew me, or thought they did, offering sympathy to the ones who devoured my voice for decades. It was a performance. A smear campaign dressed in grief. I could almost admire the choreography. Almost. But something else shifted too. Quiet messages slipped into my inbox from unexpected places. A former neighbor. I always thought it was weird how they treated you. A high school friend I hadn't spoken to in years. I saw the clip. You looked free. The clip. Someone at the party had recorded my mic drop speech. Of course they had. And someone else had shared it. Not the whole thing. Just the last 30 seconds. Me standing at the center of that sterile living room. I steady, voice calm, saying, I'm finally reacting. Then dropping the mic. It had made its rounds, not viral, but visible. Enough for people to start asking questions. Enough for the myth of our perfect family to start leaking at the edges. By Monday, my parents stopped calling. Not because they were done trying, but because they'd realized trying wasn't going to work. That's when the tactics changed. Legal threats. My father emailed me an informal request for repayment, claiming I owed the family for all the support over the years. He even attached a spreadsheet, hilariously vague, with items like childhood expenses and emotional damage. I read it twice, stunned by the audacity. Then I emailed back a PDF of my own. Line by line, every bill I'd paid. Every transfer, every emergency covered, every mortgage installment. With receipts. Final balance, $43,780.16. I ended it with 2 words, we're even. I knew then that the final fracture had happened. They no longer saw me as a daughter. I wasn't a sister. I wasn't family. I was a liability. A walking truth they couldn't control. They tried to scrub me from the narrative. They changed their social media bios to say parents of one and removed old photos from albums. But history has fingerprints. You can't delete the shape of someone's absence once they stop showing up. You can't unwrite the silence left behind. And they couldn't stop the story from changing. Because people had seen the video. People had whispered. People had wondered. I saw them once, accidentally. I was walking home from the cafe when their SUV turned the corner. My mother was in the passenger seat, hair pulled tight, sunglasses on. She looked straight at me and flinched. Not with fear. With shame. My father didn't look at all. He kept his eyes on the road, jaw set like stone. Ariel wasn't with them. I imagined her at home, rehearsing another post, another poem about pain she didn't earn. I didn't stop walking. I didn't slow down. Just kept moving, spine straight, like I had somewhere urgent to be. That was the real revenge, I realized. Not the financial cut. Not the exposure. But the dignity. The ability to keep walking when they couldn't meet my gaze. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment again, back against the wall, and wrote a single sentence in my notebook. They've become strangers who know my name. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't even sad. Just true. And truth, once you've lived in its skin, is impossible to give up. It's the only thing I trust now. Not their apologies. Not their sudden reflections. Just this, the unshakable knowledge that the girl they tried to quiet has found her volume. And she's not turning it down. The letter arrived in a cream-colored envelope, thick paper, handwritten address in my father's precise, accountant script lettering. No return address, but I knew exactly where it came from. The family lawyer's office was embossed on the corner, barely visible unless you held it against the light. For a few seconds, I considered throwing it away without opening it. But curiosity, no, clarity, pulled me back. I slit the envelope open with a butter knife and pulled out the folded pages, my name typed at the top in bold. Amendment to Living Will and Testament. The wording was sterile, but the meaning was loud. I was being cut out. Formally. Explicitly. No inheritance, no claims, no consideration. My sister would be the sole beneficiary of all assets, including the house, the joint properties, and the vacation account I had unknowingly funded for 2 years straight. They didn't even try to dress it up with sentiment. Just lines. Final. Cold. Precise. I didn't feel hurt. I felt confirmed. All those years they told me I was imagining the favoritism, all the times they gaslit me into silence, it was here now, notarized. On record. The wound had a certificate. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I took the document, laid it on my kitchen table, and poured myself a glass of wine. Not to celebrate. Not to mourn, but to witness it. This moment. The official severance of the contract they had always treated as transactional anyway. I was never a daughter in their will, I was a contingency plan. A cosigner. A convenient name on paperwork. And now, they had made the mistake of turning a relationship into math. Into signatures. And I was free. The next morning, I went to a lawyer of my own. She was younger than I expected, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued. I showed her the letter. She read it silently, then looked at me over the top of her glasses. Do you want to contest this? I shook my head. No. I want to ensure they can't ever put my name on anything again. I want to be legally unbound. She blinked, then nodded slowly. You want a full financial and legal separation. A declaration of intent. We can do that. We drafted documents. She asked if I wanted to write a letter to accompany it. Something for the record. I did. Just a paragraph. I am not family in the legal, emotional, or financial sense. Do not contact me in emergencies. Do not use my name for leverage or support. You have chosen your daughter. Let her be enough. It felt like a funeral. And I walked out of that office lighter than I had in years. That afternoon, I received a call from a blocked number. I let it ring out. Then another. Then finally, a voicemail. My mother. Her voice was flat, controlled, but I could hear the fraying at the edges. Lena, we received your documents. I don't know what you think you're doing, but this isn't how families work. You don't just opt out. I played it twice. Smiled. Wrote in my notebook. Yes, you do. That night, I put all the remaining physical remnants of them into a box. Birthday cards, a few old photos, a sweater Mom gave me after a breakup. I labeled the box archive, not trash. Because I didn't need to destroy the evidence. I just didn't want to live with it anymore. A week passed, then another, and slowly, the silence shifted from tense to sacred. No calls, no guilt-laced texts, no more pressure to be the fixer, the forgiver. My apartment didn't feel empty. It felt mine. I started rearranging the furniture. I bought a used bookshelf and filled it with novels I never had time to read because I was too busy putting out other people's fires. I framed one photo, just one. Not of me in them. Just me. On a solo trip to Portland. Wind in my hair, no one else in the frame. That was enough. I hung it above my bed, right where their voices used to echo at night. Ariel tried once more. An Instagram story of us as kids, holding hands in a kiddie pool. No caption, just the image. I didn't respond. I didn't repost. I didn't reach out. Let her remember me that way if she needed to. But I had no interest in being a relic in someone else's curated nostalgia. That girl in the photo didn't know what was coming. I did now. And I chose not to go back for her. That's the thing no one tells you about walking away. It doesn't always come with a door slam. Sometimes it's just a quiet click of a lock you never realized was on your side of the door all along. The last letter I wrote, I didn't send. I burned it in the kitchen sink. It said everything I still carried in my chest, but I realized I no longer needed to be heard. Being unheard had once felt like a wound. Now it felt like release. They could keep their house, their stories, their legacy. I didn't need to rewrite the past. I just needed to stop letting it write me. The last morning it ever mattered, I woke to 27 missed calls. It was a Wednesday. The sky was gray but soft, like the city was trying to apologize for all its other mornings. I didn't rush to check the voicemails. I made coffee first, sat by the window, watched a couple across the street argue in their hallway, their silhouettes tangled in domestic fury behind a half-closed curtain. I wondered, not for the first time, how many people were living a version of my past, giving too much, being told it wasn't enough, then blamed when they finally stopped. The phone buzzed again. Another call. This one from my father's cell. I let it ring until the silence felt complete. Then, finally, I opened the last voicemail. His voice was tight, pinched like he was trying to squeeze remorse through a pipe that hadn't carried emotion in decades. "We raised you better than this," he said. "Not I'm sorry. Not I miss you. Just that." A shaming disguised as love. He paused at the end like he wanted to say something more, but the silence swallowed it. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. And then, with the slowest, most deliberate breath I'd taken in months, I opened a new message and typed 5 words. "Don't call me again, strangers." I didn't add punctuation, didn't reread it. Just hit send and watched the notification float into the ether like a ghost finally named. That was it. No fireworks. No cinematic closure. Just a truth delivered clean. I deleted the voicemail. Deleted his number. Then I did something I hadn't done since before the party. I turned my phone off completely. Not on silent. Not on do not disturb. Off. Fully severed. For the rest of the day, I walked the city without a single digital tether. I bought myself lunch at a new place, didn't post a picture, didn't check in. I smiled at a stranger's dog. I stopped in a bookstore and bought a novel with a heroine who didn't flinch. I sat in the park and read until the sun began to lower behind the buildings, and for the first time in a long time, I forgot to think about how they might be hurting. I wasn't angry. I wasn't waiting. I was just here, living. That's the real ending no one applauds for. That evening, I returned home and lit a single candle, jasmine and bergamot, the one I'd been saving for no reason in particular. I poured a glass of wine and toasted no one, just myself. I stood in front of the mirror and studied my face, not looking for anything to fix, not hunting for pain or strength, just recognizing it. The person who stared back at me wasn't broken or vindicated. She was clean, scraped down to the bone, sure, but whole. I thought about all the versions of me that had tried to earn love like a paycheck, had tolerated silence like it was a compliment. I owed her something more than closure. I owed her a life that didn't bend at every command. I owed her peace. They didn't call again. I suspect they never will. Not because they've changed, but because they finally believe me. That I won't come running. That I won't throw myself into their flames just because they scream family while holding the matches. Maybe they've moved on to crafting a story where I was always difficult. Always selfish. Let them. Let them rewrite it in pencil while I carve mine in stone. I didn't walk away from a family. I walked away from a fiction. When I was asked to finance, direct, and star in without ever seeing my name in the credits. That's not abandonment. That's release. The last thing I did that night was open a fresh page in my journal. I didn't write a manifesto, just a list. Things I will no longer apologize for. Saying no, not answering calls, ruining a party that was never mine, choosing silence over performance, leaving staying gone. I closed the book, set it gently on the nightstand, climbed into bed without dread for the next day. Sleep didn't come quickly, but it came without ache. That was new. That was enough. I didn't dream of them. I didn't need to. Some people haunt you long after they're gone. Others, you bury while they're still speaking. And sometimes, the most sacred act of revenge is not screaming back. It's not answering at all. If this story hits something deep, if you've ever been silenced, overlooked, or made to shrink so someone else could shine, don't scroll past. Drop a comment if you've lived through it. Like if you felt that shift in your chest. Share this with someone who needs to hear they're not crazy for walking away. And subscribe, because every day, we tell the stories they tried to bury. The quiet revenge. The healing after hell. The ones who finally said no. See you soon in our next story.